So today I'm at Burr Oak Cemetery here in Athens, Michigan, and I'm exploring some history here. This is an old cemetery and it's Memorial Day weekend, so I'm going to keep my introduction and exit very short so I don't disturb other people here. But it's a beautiful cemetery and I'm going to walk around here and see what kind of history I can find to present to you in this video. Burr Oak Cemetery is located in the village of Athens, Michigan. The cemetery has burial dates that go back to the 1800s. Athens was officially incorporated as a village in 1896, according to the book A History of Calhoun County by Washington Gardner. Walking through Burr Oak Cemetery is akin to walking through the history of Athens, which I hope to take you through some of that history today, to give you a better understanding of some of the people who were important to this community. My first impression of Burr Oak Cemetery is that it is a very well-maintained cemetery with a lot of care given to the groundskeeping as well as respect to honor the military on Memorial Day weekend. The first headstone I want to call your attention to is that of Mary Shutt. Of all the markers in this cemetery, this is one that is bound to make you stop and look when you visit. Possibly even make you smile. That's what it did for me anyways. As Mary has placed upon her gravesite a stone in the shape of a chair. Now, I have toured a lot of cemeteries and I've seen benches and even an elaborate curved one at Oak Hill Cemetery by a former mayor. But this is the first time I've encountered a solo granite chair. I did not find much on Mary when I researched her. She sold her home and all of her household goods in Athens in January of 1925 and entered a home for aged women in Kalamazoo, according to this article. In doing so, she also presented 3 local churches with $100 certificates of deposit each when she left the community. She passed away in 1930 and etched upon the stone chair atop her grave, beside her name and birth and death years, are the words, "Tired friend, sit here." When I came upon this, I could not help but think Mary had a wonderful sense of humor, as well as a special sense of kindness that she wanted to extend to others, even in her own death. Now let's visit the grave of Paul Smith Fox, or as it's marked on his plot stone, P.S. Fox. He was a long-time medical doctor in the village of Athens. He was born in Park Township, St. Joseph County, Michigan, on July 14, 1860. He was the son of George and Lydia Fox, and he spent his boyhood days on the home farm and began his education in the school district and later attended high school in Three Rivers. He then began teaching for a few terms and then later went to Ann Arbor and returned to high school and graduated in 1882. I guess that was something that you could do in those days. Teach school while you're still in high school. He then continued as a teacher until he enrolled in medical school at the University of Michigan in 1883, ultimately graduating in 1888. When not in college, he continued to teach to defray his college expenses. After he graduated college, he spent 2 years as the principal of the high school in Athens. In August of 1888, Dr. Fox opened his own office in Athens and remained continually in the general practice of medicine in the community. He also made a specialty in the treatment of diseases of eye, ear, nose, and throat. Also in 1888, he married Della Childs, who was a native of Calhoun County, and together they had 2 sons, James Child Fox and Edmund Burke Fox. He remained in Athens, serving as a doctor for the entire township, with a large patronage until his death following pneumonia in 1944 at the age of 83. In his life, he was admired by those who knew him for his persistency of purpose in acquiring his education, and his life was summarized in the book Biographical Review of Calhoun County, published in 1904, as having the elemental strength of character that gave promise to a successful future. The Fonda family were among the early pioneers of Calhoun County. William Fonda was the first to arrive with his family in 1835 and settled on a large tract of land in Penfield Township. He was better known as Colonel Fonda in his time and was considered to be a man marked by influence and enterprise in his day as the most progressive agriculturalist. I did a feature on him in another video in Hicks Cemetery, which I'll include a link to this video description if you're interested in learning more about him. Edward Fonda is a descendant of Colonel William Henry Fonda, and he was a resident of Athens living off of Church Street next to the school at that time. Edward was married to Anna Fonda, and throughout their lives they lived both in Athens and in Battle Creek. They had a son, Laverne Fonda, who served in the Battle Creek Fire Department. In August of 1891, Edward was arrested for disorderly conduct in Battle Creek. He pled not guilty to the newly passed ordinance, which, passed by the Common Council at the time in the city, was designed to suppress assemblages in the street. The case attracted a lot of attention, as it was the first tried before a jury in the city under the new ordinance. Those opposing it, including Edward, viewed the new ordinance as unconstitutional as it interfered with one's right to assemble and personal liberty. The large room at the City Hall during this proceeding was standing room only, packed with people sympathizing with Fonda, and many were not able to gain admittance. The jury heard the case, and after the proceedings were over, they were in deliberations for about 5 minutes and came back in with a verdict of guilty. Edward was imposed a fine of $16.03 or 30 days in jail. He agreed to pay the fine. In 1894, Anna Fonda passed away at the age of 55 in Battle Creek. On August 27, 1901, Edward was again in the newspaper as having been arrested. This time, he was in the company of a man named A.B. Harris, who was a black man, and Mr. Harris was drunk. Harris was arrested for public intoxication, and Fonda was arrested for having furnished the liquor to him. Apparently, Harris had prior charges for drinking, and anyone who furnished him liquor was also considered in violation of the law. Harris pleaded guilty to being drunk and was committed to the county jail in Marshall for 30 days. Fonda pled not guilty and was allowed to post bail at $50. On August 29th, it was reported that Edward Fonda was taken to jail with 4 other men and 2 umbrella menders for various offenses. So apparently his day in court did not go so well. It kind of makes you wonder what the umbrella menders did, don't you think? Another somewhat funny aspect of this whole story is that Edward Fonda's son, who had been with the fire department, was at this point a constable in Battle Creek. Edward passed away at the home of his brother in Battle Creek in October of 1907 at the age of 70, and the cause of death was described as stomach trouble. The next grave to visit is that of Benjamin and Lucy Funk. Benjamin was born in 1863 in Shanesville, Ohio. He had lived in the area around Athens for over 50 years. He spent most of his years working as a salesman for the Rosenthal Cornhusker Company. He married Lucy Moulter in 1885, who was originally born in LaGrange, Indiana. She had been married before to George Russell, and her husband had passed away in 1883, leaving her widowed with a 3-year-old son. Together with Benjamin, they would have 2 sons, Charles and L.D. Funk. L.D. would go on to become a doctor and serve the community of Athens until he died in 1972. A peculiar and somewhat tragic incident occurred in February 1915 when Benjamin Funk and a man named Dorr Waterman, a local farmer near Athens, were both burned in a gasoline explosion. They were both in a clubhouse not far from Athens, and someone, presumably Waterman, poured gasoline into a stove in which the fire had not been fully extinguished. The explosion blew Mr. Funk through the door and set his clothes aflame. He rolled in the snow until the blaze was extinguished and then ran back into the house, pulling Waterman from the fire and threw him into a ditch, extinguishing the flames. The result was that both men received severe burns and were taken to the hospital. Benjamin, although burned, was able to recover relatively swiftly from his injuries. Mr. Waterman, however, received serious burns to his face and had to receive multiple skin grafts photographs. His need for help was so great that 100 pieces of skin were donated by local farmers from all over the area of Athens, as well as townsfolk at the hospital to help him out. This is something I would have never believed was possible from so many different donors. However, Mr. Dorr Waterman must have recovered as he lived until 1927, where he died from spinal meningitis. Lucy Funk passed away in 1935, having been a resident of Athens for 59 years after a prolonged illness. Benjamin would go on to live until 1941 and pass away in March of that year at the home of his son, the doctor, in Athens. He was 77 years old. David and Kalista Dawley were hotel owners in Athens. They ran the Athens Hotel, which was founded in the late 1890s in the village. David was born in New York on April 1st, 1833. His first wife was Amanda, and she passed away in 1868 and is buried at the old Burr Oak Cemetery in Athens. So with this, we know that David had been a resident of the area at least before that time. The hotel shows up on the 1894 Atlas map of Athens, being just off Main Street, diagonally across from the bank where the Dollar General store is today. He later married Kalista, and together they would serve as the hotel owners in the village. On May 6, 1911, Kalista would petition the probate court asking for her husband to be sent to the Kalamazoo Insane Asylum, claiming that David was 78 years old and was becoming violent. Apparently, he was experiencing what we know today as some form of dementia or Alzheimer's. He was ultimately committed on May 13, 1911. David would pass away on May 26, just 2 weeks later. Kalista would continue running the hotel until June of 1923, after running the hotel for over 25 years. When she was unable to get any of her heirs to take over the business, she sold the building. Another group of women from Oak Park, Illinois, would establish the Nottawa Inn in the village around the same time and become the replacement of the hotel in the community. Now let's visit the grave of Dorado Greenfield, a man with an incredibly fascinating story. Dorado Greenfield was a proprietor of the Athens Mills and was an active and leading representative of industrial interests in the Athens community during his time. Before he was born, his parents Daniel and Catherine Greenfield, who were of German descent, had lived in New York. They decided to make the overland journey to California during the gold rush. His brother George was 6 months old at the time in 1852. When they made the journey, they took 6 months by covered wagon, also referred to as a prairie schooner. Dorado was the first white child born in Smith's Flats, El Dorado County, California, when he came into the world in December of 1853. Thus, his parents gave him his name, Dorado. In 1855, according to a biographical review of Calhoun County, the Greenfields journeyed by way of the Panama Canal back to New York. However, in his obituary of his brother George Greenfield in 1928, it was explained that they returned by the route of Cape Horn, which is the southern tip of Chile, which makes a lot more sense as the Panama Canal was not open until 1904. After arriving in New York, they moved soon again and settled in LaGrange County, Indiana, in order that his father, Daniel Greenfield, could care for his elderly parents. Daniel Greenfield became a successful farmer in Indiana, and he died in 1861. His wife, Catherine, would pass away in 1883. Of their 3 children, Dorado was the middle child. He was educated in the local school districts of Indiana, and after his father died, he moved with his mother to Sturgis, Michigan in 1865, where he would live and attend high school. The family would later move to Athens, and then in 1871 to Battle Creek, where he would continue his studies. During the years of 1873 to 1874, he served on board a steamboat in Lake Michigan, working as a fisherman and later as an engineer. After leaving the service of this ship, he returned to Springfield, Indiana, where he would engage in farming until 1882. After that, he moved back to the village of Athens. In Athens, he conducted himself in business, establishing a hardware and grocery store business until a disastrous fire swept away all that he had built. Undaunted, he rebuilt his store and conducted business until he sold it in 1892. In 1895, he purchased the lumber yard in Athens, which he operated until 1899, when he exchanged it for the Athens flouring mill. The mill was operated by both steam power and water power and manufactured flour not only for home use, but also for shipping to foreign markets, shipping all over the country and even abroad. He also began manufacturing feed and turned that into a profitable business as well. In 1884, he married Miss Ada Bisbee, who was originally from Grafton, Ohio. Her parents had moved to Michigan, settling in Sherwood in 1865. Together, Dorado and Ada would have a son named George Henry, who was born September 10, 1886 in Athens. Dorado was an active member of the community and considered a public-spirited citizen whose efforts were always directed at making Athens a better place. He was not only a successful businessman, but an investor in the community. He occupied a home near the mill and also owned a farm south of the village. Both he and his wife were considered to be widely known and occupied an enviable position in the community, and often invited visitors into their home. They were remembered as being celebrated for their gracious and charming hospitality. Dorado retired from the milling business around 1912, and Ada passed away in 1914, and he lived in Athens until his death in November of 1932. Today, their monument in Burr Oak Cemetery is an impressive one defining much of their family history. The final story in this journey will be that of Samuel and Hannah Culp. The Culp monument is easily the most noticeable in Burr Oak Cemetery when you arrive, as it appears to be the tallest. Samuel was born in April of 1830 in Guilford Township, Medina County, Ohio, on his father's farm. He grew up learning the labors of farming and cultivation. He married Miss Hannah Overholt in 1850, who was born in Pennsylvania. She had moved with her parents to Ohio when she was just 18 months old. That was where she eventually met Samuel. Together they would have 4 children, 3 of which would tragically die early in life. Their only son to live to adulthood was Jerome Franklin. J.F. Culp, as he was known, was born in 1851 in Ohio. A year later, he moved with his family to Michigan. Samuel would remain in Medina County until he was 28 years old. He then moved his family to Michigan, first settling in Kalamazoo County, where he took up a claim on timberland and engaged in the operation of a sawmill. He cleared his land and turned it into a productive field, which he farmed for 10 years before he sold it and moved to Athens. He then went into business with a man named Hitchcock as a general merchant, whom he worked with for another decade. Before withdrawing from his commercial pursuits in 1882, he founded a bank in the village. In this role, he became an integral factor in the business development of the community and was widely esteemed because of his honesty and trustworthiness in business transactions. As part of the private bank, he admitted to his son, Jerome, as a partner. For a time, the store and the bank were carried on simultaneously. The bank was under the name S.R. Culp & Sons Bank, and it was a key factor in financial circles in Athens until his death on October 31st, 1893, when he was 63 years old. The bank had secured a strong patronage over the years and was one of the strongest financial institutions in Calhoun County. Another interesting project that the Culp family was involved in was establishing the railroad route between Athens and Sturgis, Michigan. Prior to his death in 1883, Samuel Culp was involved with the project, and then his son, Jerome, took over the project and was meeting in May of 1883 in Battle Creek with several other investors at the First National Bank to coordinate the project and lay out the route. This would extend the route from Battle Creek to Athens, as well as bring it all the way out to Sturgis and on to Danville, Illinois, which was a significant addition to the railroad transportation and benefit to the future of Athens. According to the 1894 Atlas, the railroad did continue on south out of town, so presumably this project was completed, even though the railroad today does not exist anymore. But back in the time, it was a significant improvement for the community. Samuel Culp had been a factor in the erection of the block of brick stores in the main heart of the village of Athens, along with the bank building. His deep interest in the future of the village led him to active cooperation for general good and was regarded as one of the most enterprising and valued citizens. Jerome, his son, had attended Athens High School and later spent 2 years at Hillsdale College, and later pursued a course in civil engineering in Ann Arbor from 1874 to 1876. He married Mary Goodrich of Ann Arbor in July of 1876, and together they would have 3 children. When he finished college, he returned to Athens and went to work in his father's store and other businesses. He worked the bank with his father jointly, and after his father's death in 1893, he continued working it alone until April 15, 1899, when he sold it to the Athens State and Savings Bank. He, however, remained on as a director of the institution. There was a great fire in Athens that destroyed the firm's property at one point, and he quickly rebuilt it. In 1896, he became interested in the drugstore in Athens and soon afterwards became the sole proprietor for many years. In his later years, he still carried a considerable stock in that business. Jerome spent most of his boyhood days in the village of Athens and made his home in the community as an adult. He was remembered by those who knew him as always being of a cordial manner, genial disposition, and deference to the opinions of others that rendered him a popular citizen whose friends were numerous. His mother, Hannah, would pass away in 1907, and Jerome passed away in March of 1910 at the age of 59. Today, their family plot marker towers above most all others in Burr Oak Cemetery, standing as a reminder to the prominence that this family once held in the community that they helped prosper. And in closing, I want to call attention to a beautiful statue that is a monument. When you first enter the cemetery, it's hard not to notice. It stands as a memorial to those that served in the Civil War from the community of Athens. Engraved on the base of the monument is the inscription, "In honor of the brave men who from Athens bore some loyal part in the Great Civil War, 1861 to 1865. The butt of his rifle in the statue is chipped away or missing, perhaps from deterioration of the years of weather, as he stands sentinel over Burr Oak Cemetery. But it's fitting that I visited this cemetery on Memorial Day weekend, and it certainly is one of the most noticeable monuments at the gateway to the cemetery. And it serves as a reminder for all those who have served our country, even in the years that followed. There are, of course, several Civil War soldiers buried in Burr Oak Cemetery. I attempted to research a few that I found and was not able to find much of a story to relay on the individuals. So I decided to close this video by showcasing this wonderful monument. Well, that's going to do it for today's journey through history here at Burr Oak Cemetery in Athens, Michigan. If you liked today's video, please take a minute to hit the like button down there. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and share the video with others. And don't forget to check out my podcast, Tales of Southwest Michigan's Past, where I share a lot more stories than I don't always get to bring to video form. So until next time, thanks for watching.